And the zombies and the robot class tend to peck at those that they see as a threat. If you were a leader within the system, then it wouldn't be a problem. And that's why, even though the reviewers are having to admit that, okay, this is a really good album, wow, it's selling a lot of copies, people are excited about it, there's still a lot of little snipes when I was reviewing the last few days what's being said, but that's a badge of honor. And I've noticed over the years, sometimes you've kind of responded to that and said, I don't know why you're doing that. Well, look, I know why they're doing it. It's more than just jealousy. It's the fact that you make them uncomfortable, and the system knows that as you mature, people like you are a real threat because you could influence others in your sphere to turn against the system. I've seen this happen in Hollywood. I've seen this happen in business circles. The system is very good at spotting people that see through the matrix, or they're good at spotting people that they know will someday fully break the trance and come out of the matrix. Your comments on that statement?
Well, thank you. That's a big compliment to take. My thought on it is that it's a little bit like the old Soviet system. If there is a system of control at the top, if there's somebody sitting in a room somewhere, we don't know his or her name, and they're dictating like a puppet master. Well, they're putting people in place on those lower rungs, those local government rungs, to dissuade independent thinking. I mean, we've all seen those YouTube clips where somebody stands up at a local city council meeting and goes, "Why are we putting, aluminum in our water?" And then, the guy hits the gavel, "Sit down, you're not allowed to talk." Well, according to the rules, I have 5 minutes. No, this kind of stuff. You want to whack-a-mole people at the bottom level. If you actually make it up to the middle level, or in my case, the upper levels, you see different things. You see a different discourse behind the scenes. If I can give anybody my own view from my experiences, let's call it behind this, let's use the term the matrix, having been at the top levels, having been in the White House and talking to people behind the scenes, having been at parties where there's 14 A-listers in the same room that I'm in, the elite class, to use your terminology, there's a sort of an amoral characteristic. They look at it sort of as a business as usual, and there's something sort of kind of Ayn Rand about it, this idea of progress marching forward, and if you run over some skulls, that's just the way it goes. And then there's something sort of frightening about it, which is like, well, what about the guy who's just a good guy and he just wants to put some bread on his table, and he just gets crushed under the wheels of that system that doesn't really individualize him. In essence, wants to see him as a statistic. Being somebody who sort of has operated inside and outside systems, having once been outside and having been completely integrated, having been given every version of the sellout option, having not taken it, having been sort of almost humiliated as an idiot for not kind of going with the flow. And
they actually say that in the reviews. They say you didn't sell out on purpose. They admit that, and they hate the fact that you did it your way, and they seem to hate it even more now that you're still having even bigger success doing it your way. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but I think I appreciate the praise in that, but I think what I'm trying to say is look around your world, anybody listening, and look at those independent thinkers and see how they run them through that same gauntlet. I have to think at this point, having been in public life for 20 years, that there's a systemic belief there. Now, is it as pernicious as somebody sitting in an office and saying, get him, get her? I don't think it. I think it's just a system that's evolved from some sort of subconscious place, much like the way kids will bully in school. It's not an agreement. The bullies don't go in the corner and say, let's pick on the kid. They just sort of unconsciously will prey upon the weak because they want to front for all the girls or whatever. It's very similar. I've run into writers. I mean, here's a perfect example. I run into writers that will come into a room, shake my hand, be very nice to me. How you doing? How you been since the last time we talked? All good. Flip the light on or press record, rip me apart, where I'm like literally backpedaling from the interview. Like, whoa, like where's this coming from? And as a younger man, I didn't really know how to handle that. The interview ends. The guy stands up and says, "Oh, great interview. Thanks so much." Then you read the thing to come out in the paper, and he says, "Oh, he was a fool. He was a nervous idiot. He was biting his nails to the quick. I mean, he can't be trusted." And I think, who are they talking about? Now, is that guy or that girl, are they part of some sort of conscious system? I don't really necessarily believe that. I think it's more an unconscious urge to please.
We're going to come back and speak with Billy Corrigan of Smashing Pumpkins here in just a moment. SmashingPumpkins.com is a great place to go, so you can find the links to get the new album, Oceania. And let me tell you, I've been a Smashing Pumpkins fan since I was in college, and I think this is one of the best records I've ever heard. It may even be better than the one that was my previous favorite. I mean, obviously the big hit, 1979. Billy, what do you want to go out to break with, and what should we come out of break with?
I think we should launch into Quasar, Alex, because it's about a God's power.
We'll be right back. Here is some of Quasar, available at SmashingPumpkins.com. We're back with the front man, the founder of Smashing Pumpkins, Billy Corrigan, and you just heard part of Panopticon. That, of course, is a system of surveillance where you think you're always being watched. What's that song about, as if the name doesn't tell us, Billy?
You know, I think it sort of deals with the duality of the two systems, right? One system being this idea that we're always being surveyed now. Like you can't go down the street without some CCTV camera picking you up, right? On another sense, there is this eye in the sky keeping an eye on us, you know? So you have a benign system and you have a malicious system, in my opinion. And so it's sort of like how it feels to be in between those two ideas.
No, exactly. I've learned watching these globalists, and I've seen some of the same things you've seen from different angles. They just know how to pick individuals that fill that space. They go out in the garden, and basically out of the millions and billions of people out there, they just select, and they can look at the college transcripts, how they wrote at the college paper, did they do what the editor wanted, and they can just select the exact type they want and then put them in that position.
Yeah, there does seem to be, let's call it a bootlicking class.
Yeah.
You know, I believe Roger Waters, you know, the great auteur of Pink Floyd, really identifies that in his incredible work, The Wall. This kind of fascist undertone to a Slavish going along, you know, I mean, obviously in The Wall he addresses World War II, his father being killed. For what purpose? Was it a just purpose? Was it a not purpose? Did anyone really care? Did anybody remember his father after his sacrifice? All the things he wrestled with, and then somehow that very intuitively intertwines with fascism. And I think that's really an incredible deep insight from Roger in that particular work, about where that thin line of where being a slave on some level, even if it's a psychological slave, even if it's just a willingness to go along because you just don't want to bother, how that somehow leads to this kind of other weird, freakish control system. And I think what we're all reckoning with is, again, we know something is there. Is it as nefarious as you go into sometimes? Perhaps. Or is it a system that's just been in play for thousands of years and nobody's even really at the wheel? And it's just kind of rumbling along because it just seems to work and there's lots of money to be.
Well, that's what Richard Nixon said. He said it's a wild beast. You can't control it. And so a lot of it is automated, but the dark generals of this system know how to guide and massage and understand those tricks. But you just went right back to that key again. It's this fake patriotism of using the troops and the flags and the idea, but in reality, you treat the troops like garbage. You take their death benefits. You give them the worst doctors. The Homeland Security documents say they're the real threat. But meanwhile, the whole fascist war machine camouflages itself as the guy down the road who went to fight because he wanted to protect America. And it's all a fraud, but people are invested in it, so they don't want to say it's wrong. We've only got about 6-7 minutes left because Billy's got to run us.
I'd like to touch on that a second because you know, I have friends that are veterans, and that's where we have to make a difference, you see. We have to bring these guys back into our communities. We have to listen to what they learned. We have to encourage their voices. We can't demonize them for being caught up in a system that maybe they're now realizing didn't stand by them like they thought they were standing by it. And that's the very difficult thing, especially if you love your country, because where do you draw those lines? At least on the local level or the relationship level, we can support those people into integrating them back into American life because they're having a really hard time, obviously. I saw this on Drudge Report the other day, and never know whether things are true or not. But it said the second highest rate of fatality in the Army right now is suicide. Was that true?
Yes, sir. Actually, in Afghanistan, it's the #1 cause. And some months, it's the #1 cause overall. The suicide rate is roughly 7 times what it was even in Vietnam, because they're sending people in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tours. Many men who were in World War II, 1 tour, suffered all sorts of serious problems. And now we bring them back here and treat them like garbage. Very well said. They've been caught up in this destructive fraud that is chewing up and murdering innocent people overseas, but doing it here on the other end in a more sneaky, devilish way. I want to race in the time we've got left here, Billy, through a raft of questions, and then any final points you've got. I think this is an amazing interview. Let's continue here with other issues. GMO. Your take on genetically modified organisms. I mean, I'm no rocket scientist, but you have corn that the bugs can't eat because it grows its own pesticide, but then we feed it to humans. And then in the studies, it's causing organ failure in the rats. What's your view on GMO, and what do you think the power structure is doing there?
Well, I tend to look at something like this as pretty simple. Number one, it's not going to go away, all right? So what do we do about it? I think it's something like, I ask the question like this: why don't we have a choice as a consumer to know whether or not we're consuming these foods? It's becoming more and more difficult to be able to identify whether or not we're actually eating genetically modified food. That's where it's like, okay, if we can't stop it at the top, why can't we stop it at the bottom? We need to fight those fights. And just circling back to the veterans again, so if we know something like this, where is this public discourse that we should be having? Why aren't there congressional hearings? Why don't we have this airing out, especially on patriotic, quotation news sources like Fox News? Why isn't there a bigger discussion going on? That's where I get suspicious. You see what I'm saying? The stuff you allude to sometimes, I don't have the personal information necessarily to know whether or not that's true. I can sort of on face value say, well, there's something there, where there's smoke, there's fire. Where I go to is why don't certain systems necessarily then come into play when you would think they would? If we know now that suicide is very high amongst our soldiers, why isn't there a movement in the country to figure out why? Now, you can say intuitively, I know why, right? But you can also engage a system to say there must be a reckoning, there must be an accountability.
Exactly. Why don't they care? Why aren't they making that the story of the boy at the bottom of the well?
But we have to make that the story. That's what I'm saying. Look, you used to listen to the radio and you thought, you know what, I got something else to say. You started your own station, right? Okay, I used to look at rock and roll and say, I can do this better, I can do this different. I started my own rock and roll band, which turned into my own radio station, you see? So this is the thing. We need to start our own radio station. We need to start our own blog.
We all need to be the individuals we are, and that way the cookie-cutter Borg cannot overtake us. Very well said.
Yeah, see, that's why, and when we talked before, and I say this, don't get caught in this left-right stuff. You know what I mean? Look at a human being who's come back from a war. Whether or not you agree with why they were there, why they enlisted, you look at a human being, and you see that